What's up, everybody? It is EK, the host of the Devy Dose, back with my friend and co-pilot, Jake, Kyle, at KL Fantasy. It is late already.
Confusing your undroppables already.
I know. I am the worst. Fire me now. We're stoked about this show. We're stoked about this series we're doing. So this is the first one of our Building the Big Board series, and we're going to go through, we're not reinventing the wheel here, but we're going to go on a team level, kind of conference by conference, and really dig up, looking for hidden treasure. We're trying to dig up some gems for you, for Campus to Canton, some gems for you, for CFFB Dynasty, CFFB Best Ball. Really get you some names that you should know going into your draft this season. And hey, I got to say, this is partly for Kyle and me too, because, this is where you win your Campus to Canton leagues on the college side. And you see Kyle nodding over there. We were talking before we started, and this is my weak spot usually. I'm real good at the P5 guys. I'm strong on the waivers. I draft pretty well. But, a few of these guys putting up 1,100, 1,200 yards, 12 touchdowns that you got for free at the end of your startup or in the 13th, 14th round of your supplemental can be a major difference maker for you in getting that pot and winning money. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to win money. We're trying to help you guys win money too. So tonight we got a banger. We got the Mountain West, everybody's favorite conference. Not so much, but we thought it was a good.
What a big deal.
What a big deal. We thought it was a good place to start, and as we kind of flesh out our format and figure out the best way to navigate this and try not to break people's brains in a bad way, but give you guys what you need to break your leagues in a good way. So
yeah, we purposely picked the conference that we know the least about because there's the fewest players, but that's coming back to bite us, I think, a little bit. We do. We could have started with something familiar and been a little more ready off the bat, but I think we have a decent idea of what we're doing in the mountains.
I think we're pretty goddamn prepared for the show. Kyle says we're unprepared. We have 4 pages of names.
Nah, we should have 6.
We should have 6. We should have more. So yeah, like I said, we got a lot of content coming at you. We'll flash this a little bit right now. So we did throw up a big board. We threw up some rankings. We threw up some rankings on the Devy side, right? Or, NFL, Campus to Canton, pipeline, and some CFFB. We're still kind of tweaking that a little bit as we go, but we don't want to just work off this. We got some awesome notes. So we're gonna put this away for now. We're just putting a little teaser there. And we're gonna start from the top, start with the wide receiver position, probably the most important position in CFFB to win, in my opinion. Who do you want to talk about first, Kyle?
Let's start with the holes. Who's getting out of here? Yeah.
I mean, we got a list.
It's a big list. I mean, these are the guys who helped us win championships for the last 2 years, and now we got to find the next ones, which is tough.
But it's going to make for some fun waivers in the first 3 weeks of the season in those open waiver leagues too. So yeah, and as we were going through this, I was just like, oh god, he's gone too. Just really anyone of consequence at the wide receiver position except one guy is gone. Let's fire him off, Kyle.
Yeah, Fresno State loses 3 wide receivers. Jalen Cropper and Nico Rumigio both run out of eligibility / go to the NFL, whatever. And then Josh Kelly transfers out and goes to the Pac-12. San Jose State loses star wide receiver Elijah Cooks. That's a guy who was a top fantasy performer in recent years. Utah State loses Brian Cobbs, who is pretty solid in fantasy. UNLV loses Kyle Williams, who was their number 1B, number 2 wide receiver. Zion Bowens is done at Hawaii. Tyrell Shavers at San Diego State. BJ Castile at Nevada. And then Colorado State loses 2 players to the transfer portal, Dante Wright and Melquan Stovall, both guys who had expectations going into last year. Dante Wright just didn't play at all. Melquan Stovall was not all that interesting, as it turned out to be.
Yeah, well, it was a rotten offense last year, as we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, which is tough because, I mean, it wasn't something we saw coming with Colorado State after they obviously took a new head coach in Jay Norvell. And, Jay Norvell brought his offense with him. I mean, he brought Clay Millen, he brought Dante Wright, he brought Torrey Horton, right? And then it just didn't work out. They didn't do what they did with Carson Strong and Romeo Dubs and Cole Turner. And they were much less pass heavy, just much less efficient as an offense in total. So maybe they can get back there.
Yeah. Do you have high hopes for them this year? I mean, maybe a year to institute the offense, get some personnel.
I would love if that was the case. I mean, I still have a bunch of holdover Clay Millen from last year that I was excited about. So hopefully. I mean, I touched on Torrey Horton. I think he's the biggest returner in the conference in terms of wide receiver. 71 receptions, 1,100 yards, and 8 touchdowns last year.
Yeah.
That'll get it done.
Yeah, get it done. That's helpful. And again, like I even playing last year, I still was like, Torrey Horton, who's that? Like this year, digging it up. So some of these guys, not everyone in your league is even going to be aware of unless they're super sharp with their small schools. And Horton is literally the only guy that I pulled off of the top 20 wide receivers in the conference last year that returned. Everyone else gone or was like pretty insignificant, right? But there's some of these guys, like we said. So that the key of this is going to be to figure out who's sliding into those roles. There's a few people coming back that had significant production, and we'd have to assume, a lot of times it's the you wait your turn, you get to slide up your role in the offense. The first guy that I had there that I thought was useful with Kyle Williams being gone, Ricky White at UNLV. He was a Michigan State transfer the previous year. He went for 619 and 4 last year, kind of right as a 1A, 1B situation. Got some hopes that he does better this year, although they did lose the quarterback there that was slinging it around the yard. I feel like there was someone else waiting in the wings there, though. So maybe
UNLV? Brumfield was their quarterback last year. Isn't he still there?
Oh, I thought. Who am I thinking of?
Utah State?
Right.
The other
Utah State? No, I don't know. I thought it wasn't Brumfield. I thought it was. I'll remember.
Harrison Bailey.
Oh, God. Bailey is in the conference now, right?
Yeah.
All right, so Brumfield back, Ricky White back. That's a good combination. The other couple of guys in that category I had that did something last year that are coming back was Justin Lockhart from San Jose State, went for about 600 and a tutty, and Tyler Vaughn from Utah State went for 524 and 3. And both of those guys have some more opportunity this year that they didn't last year. Who you got in this group, Kyle? I think you had some good names here as well.
I mean, Ricky White is the obvious player who's gonna, have a bigger opportunity this year. I like Terrell Vaughn at Utah State. I think he's pretty solid. I think Justin McGriff is still there, and he's a pretty decent wide receiver. But they need to figure out quarterback. Legis was all right last year. But they were better when they had Logan Bonner 2 years ago. So, I take back Justin McGriff did go pro. So it's just Vaughn. I mean, that makes it even better, honestly, because he's splitting work with McGriff. And so now Vaughn steps into a bigger opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah.
But like I said, I'd love their quarterback situation to be a little better.
Yeah. Well, you think you could say that about, every school in this conference except maybe San Jose State right now, right? I had a couple other names that were kind of interesting there that I don't know. These are like dart throw guys. But I figured whoever's the wide receiver one for Fresno State is going to be a guy who won. I mean, there is like 2,000 plus yards of offense gone, to the NFL, et cetera, with Cropper and Remigio. The guy returning with the most production was named Eric Brooks. He had like a couple hundred yards though. So I think that is the Wild West there. Certainly something that's worth taking some shots at, in later rounds of your best ball drafts, or even super late in your supplementals, or just watching the waiver if you're in a league with open waivers. San Diego State, Mark Redmond went for a couple hundred yards. Again, Shavers had 600 plus last year. And then Kyle dug up Raphael Williams, who's a transfer into San Diego State, who had over 600 yards and 6 touchdowns in a shortened season at Western Carolina last year. He could be the guy there. They obviously brought him in for a reason. All right. What do you think? Anything else to talk about at the wide receiver position, Kyle?
I think you talked about Fresno State and like guys who could produce there. They have a JUCO wide receiver added to the mix, and Tim Greer. He's the wide receiver 8 in the JUCO rankings according to 24/7. So I think he's the guy who could compete for that production. And then another JUCO guy who joined the conference was DJ Washington, going to New Mexico, and he was the JUCO wide receiver 2 according to 24/7, and that's across the country. So I mean, that's a guy that 24/7 liked. So
who's that? Washington?
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm a JUCO wide receiver 2. Those guys are often a factor. I feel highly ranked JUCO guys. People like kid in South Carolina.
The issue is it's New Mexico, and New Mexico is a horrible program and a horrible offense. I mean, they've won like 4 games in the last 2 seasons, maybe. They'll probably win 1 or 2 this year, and like they don't even throw the ball often. I mean, this is a team that had a 29% neutral script pass rate last season.
That's pretty bad. And still didn't have a running back that you really wanted either.
Yeah.
That's a double whammy.
They just ran into their offensive lineman 3 times and punted every time they got the ball.
That's a way to run an offense for sure. All right, I think we can move on here. Although you did have some interesting freshmen too. Do you want to touch on them now, or do you want to come back to that?
Yeah, I think the only freshman, like true freshman, who really stuck out to me was Justin Marshall, a wide receiver at Colorado State, who was the wide receiver 115 according to 24/7. I think that makes him the highest rated wide receiver recruit in the conference this year.
Yeah.
So any wide receiver, like any freshman wide receiver who pops off this year is going to be a bit of a surprise. We're not talking about highly recruited guys. Marshall, I believe, is on the shorter side, but could be an interesting player.
It's short king season of the position, man. I mean, look at the draft this year. We got Downs. You got like,
and they all went later than we thought they would.
They did, yeah. Mims. You got Downs. You got who's the really little
Tyler
guy?
Scott.
Tyler Scott. Was Tyler Scott 4th round? Tank though. Tank got really good draft capital. I don't know if he does
Tucker.
anything. Yeah, Tucker. I mean, Christ, even Addison's like 170 pounds, right? Flowers is $180, 5'8" if he's lucky. So who knows? All right, so on to the running back position, which I think for me is a little bit more interesting in this conference. Again, like
it's a little bit more clear.
Yeah, a little more clear.
It's also like easier at the running back position to see like who was number 2 last year. Right. Wide receiver, they're all splitting reps, and it's like, oh, maybe this guy was number 2. Maybe this guy's going to step up. But running back, it's like, oh, there was a guy who was the clear second back who should be the first back or could be.
Yeah, and a lot of them, I think, are, if there's a decent line and a decent scheme, you can kind of shove a jag in there and get the production. I mean, Calvin Tyler last year from Utah State, he, wasn't anything to write home about, but he was extremely productive when he was on the field. Tuatawa, I think, was actually a pretty good talent, right? But I mean, Jordan Mims was kind of just a guy with some skill when he was.
Just to be clear, we're listing guys who are no longer in the conference.
Yeah,
these are all guys who are gone.
This is the who's gone at running back as we have it. And there's a couple other guys that were, really, really relevant. Aiden Robbins, UNLV, gone. Titus Swen, Wyoming, transferred, or is he in the NFL, Kyle?
He is in the NFL.
He's, UDFA, guys. Brad Roberts, superstar for fantasy. If you had Brad Roberts on your team last year, you were stoked. 1,700 yards, 17 touchdowns. And that's
0 receptions.
Yeah, 0 receptions. But you know what? Whoever gets that job this year is going to be, hot fire. And then Dedrick Parson, Hawaii, was the other departure that we saw was significant. So
kind of the opposite of Roberts, more of a hybrid running back, wide receiver type. I mean, that's how Hawaii is a team that's going to throw to their running back. So I think that makes them specifically interesting in terms of PPR leagues.
Yeah, I mean, and what was it? Day went on to Liberty, and it's been really successful there as well. But
he's in the portal again, though.
He is?
Yeah.
Not
apparently some of the quote unquote Christian values at Liberty kind of turned him off. And I think there was something about his apartment getting raided by the police for no reason, and he was kind of over it. Which is
you just want to smoke some weed, it's Hawaii. He's trying to blaze, man. Leave him alone. All right. For me, I guess while we're talking about the Air Force, right? You dug up John Lee Eldridge III, who was productive last year in the RB2 role for them. 99 carries, 766 yards, 4 tutties, right?
7.7 yards a carry.
Will they do a triple option there? Is that what they're doing?
Yeah. So Brad Roberts was technically the fullback, I believe. So whoever kind of fills into that role is going to be the guy. And Eldridge was their second most productive running back last year. They'll have a new quarterback this year as well, as Zeke Daniels is in the portal. So I don't know if that quarterback's worth anything because they're an option team, but the quarterback doesn't do that much.
They see some of them. The quarterback runs quite a bit and is useful for that reason. But
but even the ones that do, it's tough for fantasy for them. They have to have so many attempts. They have to be basically truly a glorified running back.
Yeah. So anyways, Eldridge, definitely a guy, right, that we want to hit up. I mean, that's more than a lot of teams RB1s had last year. That's pretty sweet. And then I think probably the team we're most excited about for running back, right, is Boise, I'd say, right, Kyle?
Yeah, for sure. I think they definitely have the most talented running back room in the conference, by 12 miles, maybe 100 miles, the entire their running back room talents in New York City, and the rest of the conference is in LA. Boise State recruits a low P5, and the rest of the conference doesn't.
Yeah.
So
Fresno had a run there, but So I mean, George Halani, right? He's probably NFL guy, right? UDFA, but maybe sticks on a roster. I could see. I don't think he's very fast. I think he's runs a 4.7, right? But definitely a tough rusher. 5.2 a clip last year for over 1,100 yards and 10 touchdowns. I mean, that'll get it done. And then I think you're even more excited about Mr. Jeanty. Is that right?
Yeah, Ashton Jeanty, I think, is a really great player. I think he came into college as a very polished runner, and he was somebody that I was high on as a recruit, and so I'm still very high on him in the future. Obviously, my GT shares were hoping that George Holani wasn't going to be here this year, so we could get the true breakout. But I think we'll see. He had a pretty productive freshman season. I think he'll improve even further.
I mean, pretty productive. He had almost 1,000 combined yards and 7 touchdowns. So, yeah, I mean, that's good enough. And just to, a little more preview, like, this is the only guy in the Mountain West that we think is like a guy to target in Devy or really spend significant resources on in a Kansas to Canton in terms of a player with NFL future. He's not a big running back, but he is a dual threat guy, catches the ball well, and is a strong runner. So San Jose State has a decent running back returning. Tyree Robinson ran for about 750 and 10 touchdowns last year. He's back, so look for more of the same from him. And then they also added a guy from the portal that. Whoop.
He also had 26 receptions last year.
That's pretty nice.
Pretty significant.
Yeah, you want to talk about Afonso?
Oh, yeah, they did add a running back out of Montana State, Isaiah Ifanzi. More of a grinder, kind of a smaller guy, and he's a grad transfer, so I believe he only has 1 year of eligibility, but he's 5'10", 205, so decent size. And then in 2021, when he played 14 games for Montana State, he had 280 attempts for 1,623 yards and 10 touchdowns. And then last year he only played in 3 games, but he had 281 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, some production, man. I don't care if that's at an FCS level. That's still pretty sweet in my opinion.
Yeah, and Montana State's a good FCS team. I mean, they were 12-2 last year, made a playoff run as well.
So we got a couple other guys that we think are, likely to take on lead roles for their teams. One guy's a transfer, Sean Dollars. You might know the name. He's caught a little bit of hype a few times in the past. Was, I think, a decent recruit for Mater Day. I want to say he was a 3-star guy or higher. Was at Oregon. Kind of lost the starting job this last year, I want to say. Or was he hurt? I'm not sure which.
A little bit of both.
Yeah, it was supposed to be the guy. There's
definitely some injury issues in the past. He was a high 4-star, actually, the number 2 all-purpose back in the class of 2019.
Got it. Yeah, so he's been playing for a little bit already. But yeah, I think he's the guy at Nevada, and again, like, he's probably the offense if he's the guy. So could be really prolific there. And you know what? Even in a short season last year, he carried the ball 34 times. He caught it 16. I mean, that's a hybrid role almost,
Yeah, he's a smaller guy, kind of a receiving back, a satellite back. I mean, he came out of high school weighing 185 at 5'10", which is pretty small for running back. 24/7 Compton to James White back in the day. So definitely more of a satellite back, but like Toa Taua, I believe, is like of similar stature and skill set. So they could probably use him in a very similar way. And
yeah, I mean,
he wasn't bad.
Taua was phenomenal for fantasy too. Just pass catching, high yardage, touchdowns. So hopefully Dollars can slip in there and get some of that same cash production for you. Fresno sliding into Jordan Mims's role. I'm thinking it's going to be Malik Sherrod. He was the RB2 last year. Was efficient, 5.4 carry, 80 carries, 428 yards, 7 touchdowns, as the second guy there. I think it seems likely that he's going to take the role. Honestly, he's similar in stature to Mims as well. He's a little guy, but stocky, like 5'7", $190 sort of guy. So, I don't know, you got anything on Sherrod?
No, I think he'll probably step up into Mims's role, and that'll come with some fantasy points for sure. Not totally sure he's like super talented. Might be a jag, but if he's a starting running back for Tedford, I think that's something. But to go back to Nevada, Tawa was the RB31 in CFF last year. Had 51 targets, so a pretty decent chunk of targets for running back that dollars could definitely fill into.
Yeah, that is, again, he's probably free right now. I don't even know if he's where he went in the last couple best balls we did. To Utah State, you think the guy that steps up there is Robert Briggs? He'll be a junior this year. 74 carries last year. Couple of 7 catches. Thinking he slides right into that role. I don't believe they got a transfer or any kind of crazy recruit that's going to steal the job there.
Yeah, I don't think Utah State necessarily has a obvious replacement for Calvin Tyler Jr. Like you said, Briggs was the guy who was, third on the team in carries behind Tyler and the quarterback. But
yeah,
I'm not ready to crown him, that's for sure. I don't think he did anything spectacular. Like, not even to the point of like a guy like Sherrod, who is really decently on the field.
4.7 yards per play for Briggs certainly isn't anything great, right? You'd expect a good 4.4 yards per catch. lower yards per catch than he did per rush attempt. So certainly not a dynamo in the passing game.
No.
Unlike this next guy here, who was highlighted by Candace DeCanton's own Volume Pigs, and one of the only articles we could find about the Mountain West, despite Kyle scouring the internet. You wanna talk Hines here?
Yeah. Sorry, I'm forgetting his first name off the top of my head. Tylen Hines. Tylen Hines.
He's right there.
I'm looking all over the place. I'm still researching as we're talking right now, trying to find somebody who's worth talking about.
You degen. I got stats right there for you.
but yeah, Tylen Hines. He's 5'7", kind of a Swiss Army knife skill set type of guy who's like listed on the kind of like sort of depth chart as a running back wide receiver hybrid. Kind of like a guy like Calvin Turner was, or Day Hunter was. Both those guys were very productive in that Hawaii offense. And it's a different coaching staff with Timmy Chang, but I think it's still a very similar system. Chang's a former Hawaii player himself. They'll still run that kind of run and shoot offense that they've always run, which has been kind to fantasy running backs. And just last season, Hines ran for 634 yards and 2 touchdowns on just 82 attempts, which is a staggering 7.6 yards per carry. That'll get it done. He had 18 targets as well as the RB2, which should, hop up when you consider that Dedrick Parson is gone, who himself had 36 targets. So room for more targets and more receptions for Tylen Hines. And then not just Parson leaving, but their wide receiver 1 leaving, Zion Bowens. So definitely production to fill in this offense. And Tylen Hines is probably the most experienced in the program in terms of offensive weapons, so probably the one who is going to take that offense and lead it.
It seems like he's been extremely efficient, and targeting the Hawaii running back is pretty much always a good idea in these drafts. It's a system there. Like, give me running backs that catch passes all day. I'm in.
And I mean, it's not just Hawaii too. I mean, they got a new offensive coordinator this year, Schumacher. I don't know which one it is, but he's coming from the Eastern Washington Eagles. And in 2021, Eastern Washington's running back ran 201 times for 933 yards and 15 touchdowns, and added 370 receiving yards on 32 receptions. And the second leading running back had 54 carries. So it's more of a RB1 situation than a running back by committee situation in the past with their coaching staff, which always helps for fantasy football.
Yeah, I love it. And the other school that I had highlighted that I think we're interested in who takes the RB1 role was Wyoming. Titus Swen was great last year as well. It's moved on. But again, I even just looking at the depth chart from last year, I mean, there was two guys that both had some carries. And I'm probably going to murder his name. Sorry. No, Dwyan McNeely. 63 carries, 356 yards, 5.7 an attempt, no catches. Or there was another guy, DQ James, who only toted it 40 times, but for 8.7 a clip, and got some passing game work, 5 catches, 4 yards.
Yeah, one thing we did miss in this show sheet, which is kind of a really big deal, Harrison Whaley from Northern Illinois transferred to Wyoming this offseason.
Whaley's in Wyoming?
Yeah. So Wyoming Whaley, probably going to be the RB1.
Yeah, that's exciting too. It's a great system for running backs.
Yeah, absolutely. So the reports out of spring are that Harrison Whaley and Dwayne McNeely are kind of the 1-2 punch, with Whaley being the 1 and McNeely being the 2. And then DJ James, more of a speed threat than anything else.
Yeah, awesome. Kyle, saving our bacon, man. Can't miss the Whaley. Whaley was awesome last year, too. So, limited. He got hurt last year, right? Stinged up.
Sounds right. He got replaced a little bit, if I remember right.
Yeah, by the other. They all transferred, too. Kid went to Memphis after it.
It'll come to us.
Yeah, not stressing it. And then there's a couple of freshmen that Kyle thought were interesting. John Brace Dubar, Boise State.
Ontario Brown. That's the other that's the other Northern Illinois running back.
Yeah, Ontario. Yeah. Didn't he he went to Memphis, right?
No.
The other guy then went to Memphis. The other guy that was good in the the MAC.
I think Carson Steele left the MAC. Somebody else left.
I'll tell you, someone went to Memphis.
We're just going. We're just thinking. Ace, no. Eric might be dreaming.
I am not. I am 100% correct. And now my browsers are all frozen.
There is not a single player who went through the transfer portal and went to Memphis.
Fuck.
None of them went to Memphis.
Well, screw you too, man.
Catravian Hargrove went to Memphis from Mississippi State.
Yeah.
I think you're going crazy.
So I think
Blake Watson out of Old Dominion.
Oh,
you're going crazy.
Watson's actually interesting though. Maybe that is. I must be mixing up Memphis and another school, but
different conference. We'll get there.
Yeah. We'll get there.
Not in the Mountain West.
Not. So, quarterbacks. Who is gone? Hazek Daniels, which I don't think anyone cares about, anyways?
Oh well, wait! Don't jump too far. I did want to talk about Dubar. I mean, Dubar,
Oh, all right.
the freshman in Boise State. He's a legit prospect. I mean, he was the 20th ranked running back in the entire nation according to 24/7.
Yeah.
He's played high school football in Texas, 4-star recruit. I mean, like Jeanty, Dubar, Holani. Like I said, the talent in the Boise State running back room is ridiculous compared to the rest of this conference, and like all three will probably play in a preseason game at least.
At least, yeah, I'm with you.
And then alongside him, I did have Damian Henderson, who's joining the Colorado State Rams, who was a top 30 running back prospect in the nation last year. So that's a player to be looking out for as well. A pretty open room, as you know, the returning running back is currently in trouble with the law. So Henderson could start day one.
That's exciting.
A 6'1", 6'1", 185.
185.
Slim.
That's not a running back build, my friend. That's why he's at Colorado State.
Yeah. He did have 1,700 rushing yards and 23 rushing touchdowns as a senior at Los Alamitos in California.
I mean, that's a strong division too, right?
Yeah.
In Southern California. Yeah, interesting. So it's definitely a guy to keep an eye out. I think he's on he should be on our Devy rankings board.
While he does that, I'll move on to quarterbacks. As Eric said, Hazik Daniels, the former Air Force quarterback, is in the transfer portal. Not super productive for CFF, so not really a big deal. Jake Hayner, one of the best quarterbacks in college football in recent years. Obviously gone, drafted on early day 3, late day 2 by the Saints. Getting those comparisons to Drew Brees, both short of stature, kind of ballsy players in the clutch. Logan Bonner from Utah State was a big deal in CFF in 2021. Last year got injured and replaced. He is gone. He is in the portal. And then Hank Bachmeier, same thing from Boise State, injured, replaced, and now in the portal. And then coming back, a guy who I almost assumed was out of eligibility. Like I think one of my C2C leagues was like, hey, tell me the players who aren't in sleeper yet who are on your roster. And I was like, oh, Chevan Cordiero. Like, he's out of eligibility. He has to be, but he's not.
Yeah. He's milking that super senior year, man. Beat up on those 18-year-olds, bro.
He will once again be the starting quarterback at San Jose State. Very productive last year, threw for 3,200 yards and 23 touchdowns. Very much a legit player and a player who's going to get the opportunity to score. I want to tell you like what his ranking was in CFF last year so that we can get a baseline. And then also returning in the conference is another big one is Taylon Green at Boise State. I was telling Eric before the show, I think Taylon Green is my favorite player in the Mountain West. Either him or Jeanty. Green was the player who replaced Bachmeier last year and obviously is not getting the job back. He's the type of guy who could throw for like 3,000 yards and run for 1,000, which is, great for college fantasy. And I have it up now. Chevan Cordiero was the quarterback 22 last year in CFF. So like, that's a starter. That's a starter in 2 quarterback leagues, which like everybody is playing. So, I mean, that's a legit player that you want on your rosters and you're still going to want this year. Average 32 fantasy points a game. Like, yeah, that's the guy we want. But back to Taylon Green at Boise State. I mean, rushing production is there. Passing production is a possibility. He averaged 24 fantasy points a game last season. And we can hope he further steps into his role and improves. Because he's still a young guy. He's a true junior now, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, stats from last year are, not eye-popping, but certainly enough to catch your eye. I mean, 271 attempts, 2,042 yards for a 61%. I mean, for a dual threat guy, that's fine. 7.5 yards per attempt isn't NFL-worthy, but also, young guy coming into position, didn't even play as a freshman, right? And then 81 carries, 588 rushing yards. I mean, that is money-making rushing production right there, and another 10 tutties on the ground. I mean, man, if he throws for 3,000 yards, he's probably a top 15 quarterback at that point. I mean, this is super interesting, and definitely.
Yeah, he had 2 games in the fantasy football playoffs last year. Against Utah State, he scored 50.7 fantasy points, and then in the final week of the season against North Texas, he scored 43.9 fantasy points. I mean,
gimme.
Yeah. when you can score, 3, 4, 5 touchdowns a game, especially if you're running in a couple of them, and you're getting 6 points instead of 4, that's a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, I think Utah State they're like a pretty decent Mountain West team too, right? So it's not like he's beating up on the slow kid on the corner either. It's, not an SEC team, but
it's not, it's not like Fresno either, but yeah.
So anyways, this is probably replicable, right? Like there's a good shot that he gets to do some of this year. And I think honestly, for me, the position group that's probably the most interesting here is the quarterbacks. I mean, there's a few of these guys that are dual thready, have a little bit of experience under their belt, or have some reasons that we might be interested in them, right? I mean, Clay Millen, who you brought up earlier, who came over from Nevada with Norvell, right? I mean, he was okay last year. It wasn't great for fantasy, but threw for 72% of his passes were completed, 8.2 yards per attempt. Those are really good numbers, honestly. And then he had a little bit of a rushing floor as well. Cooper Lagasse, who took over for Bonner, right, at Utah State, actually has a nice rushing floor. He carried the ball 100 times, 303 yards. Like, that's not great, but I mean, he's getting the carries. But also threw for 1,500 and 11 touchdowns. So, so there's some floor there. And then there's some couple other guys that I think are coming in. Oh, I think you had one other kind of returning guy with Jalen Maiden, right? He's coming back.
I mean, he started most of the season for San Diego State last year, was pretty impressive on the ground and through the air. I mean, he had 69 rushing attempts for 231 yards and 3 touchdowns. And then threw for 2,000 passing yards on 60% completion percentage. It's just an interesting player. I mean, this dude was recruited to Mississippi State to play safety and then changed from safety to quarterback, went to San Diego State. But like that, he obviously has SEC athleticism, even if it's at the safety position. So he's a guy who can probably beat players with his legs at quarterback now. The Brady Hoke offense is not awe-inspiring whatsoever. But, I mean, he had, a 36 fantasy point showing against San Jose State last year, was relatively often and most of the time in the 20s in fantasy points, apart from a few, just completely horrible games against the Air Forces and Fresnos of the world. But I think he's a good player. I think he's somebody you can stash really late and could maybe take off this year or next year.
Yeah, cool. Good stuff. And then we got some new guys coming in that are a little bit interesting too. Kyle highlighted Dylan Hopkins, who transferred out of UAB to New Mexico. Again, New Mexico, poverty, football program, but the kid had 8.9 yards per attempt at UAB, 31 touchdowns last year, 62% completion rate. I mean, those are decent passing numbers.
Yeah.
Who knows?
I don't know exactly what's going on at UAB, but from a way outside perspective, it's like, why did this guy transfer? He's been the starting quarterback for 2 straight years. He is a favorite player of mine, as he grew up close to me, and Knoxville area kid. So love to see him succeed in New Mexico.
Yeah, I wonder, did they get a transfer at UAB or high recruit, or
you'll just have to wait until the Sun Belt episode.
Yeah. And then a guy that I'm interested in, Mikey Keene, might be, is in contention for the starting job at Fresno State, which obviously we know is a little bit more of a prolific offense here than most of these Mountain West programs. It's not saying he's going to be Jake Haener, but the kid played okay at UCF. 72% completion rate, 7.8 yards per attempt. Wasn't a prolific passer, but was efficient. Six touchdowns, 1 interception. There was some good stuff going on there. And then Keene has legs. I think he caught the attention of a lot of us. He had some crazy 82-yard touchdown run at the end of 2021 or the beginning of last year. And we were all like, oh, great, fantasy points, and didn't really do what we wanted him to last year. I think he lost the job at UCF, right, to a transfer. I'll say Plummer or something. That I don't know.
John Rice Plumlee.
Yeah, right. Who, again, is also a dual-threat guy. But I think Keene has potential. He's got the wheels. We've seen it. And it wasn't just it wasn't a Tom Brady run. It was gets fast. It was like Daniel Jones type running, right? Not a ninja out there on the field, but has some wheels. That's the kind of guy that, like we talked about, can really change your fantasy team.
Yeah. And I believe in terms of spring football, he was the leader, although they didn't declare him the starting quarterback yet.
Got it. So I think Jay Butterfield transferred in. I think we mentioned that earlier. If we didn't, he's now at SJSU. Obviously, he's not
Chevan
unlikely. Unlikely that he takes the job from Cordiero, but Cordiero's like a 6th or 7th year college player. So Butterfield might be.
Yeah, but Butterfield's a former 4-star who went to Oregon. He could definitely take over the job next year, and he'd have the added benefit of working behind Cordiero for a year, actually knowing the offense going into next spring. So very likely he takes that job if he chooses to stay into next season. And as we've seen with Cordiero, that can be a prominent CFF role. So
3,000 plus yards, and then Brendan Lewis. Do you want to talk about him?
He was the starter at Colorado back in 2021. Obviously, Dion didn't think he's anything. He's obviously not Dion's son, so he's not going to start at quarterback at Colorado.
Yeah,
so
that's a tough one if you're not Shedder,
He is transferring to Nevada to compete with Shane Illingworth for that job. Nate Cox probably in that competition as well, and I believe there's a freshman in there.
Leatherwood, Jax Leatherwood.
Yeah. It's been a horrible offense. Well, it was a horrible offense last year. Obviously, they went through some coaching changes as Norvell left for Colorado State, as we've mentioned. So it's not the offense that we saw with Carson Strong and Cole Turner and Romeo Dubs. It's nothing close to that. So it's not. I'm not sure it's a role that we care about. Shane Illingworth definitely wasn't anything worth rostering last year, even in the deepest of deep CFF C2C leagues. But Brendan Lewis is there, so
yeah. And then you have a couple of freshmen you highlighted. I don't know. Keep an eye on these guys.
Three guys who are all in the top 60 at the position for 24/7. So
Right. So potential starters, but I mean, do we care about the starter at Nevada at this point? I don't know. Boise State, maybe. CJ Tiller, QB
in the
42.
future.
Yeah, and then Javon's Tuapata Johnson at San Diego State. Again, it looks like there's a couple of guys in front of him, but maybe he gets a job and runs with it. So tight ends. I mean, the short version of tight end is you don't want to find a tight end in the Mountain West. There's not a lot, man. We were scrolling fan tracks to see anyone score points last year, and there's a couple of guys that are gone, but you probably won't even recognize their names. There's one kid, Trayton Welch, who's giving you about 8 fantasy points a game. I mean,
I believe he scored like 6 touchdowns last year. So definitely more of a big-bodied guy who's going to catch the ball in the red zone more than anything else. I'm not even sure he's much of an athlete, but that is production in itself at Wyoming. He had 5 touchdowns last year on 22 receptions, so definitely a touchdown guy, a hit or miss type guy, and which is annoying to roster and at tight end. So probably not even worth it.
Yeah, you know how to start these guys. Then Dominic Mazzotti from SJSU, which I'm not sure if he's back or not. I was going to check. He was useful, 10 points a game. He was injured, so I think not on the radar for a lot of people. And there's a couple of guys that transferred in that could do things, but again, they're both going to offenses we don't like, so probably not guys that were. What, you like Hoker?
Oh, yeah. This isn't supposed to be about it. This is supposed to be Colorado State.
Okay.
Yeah. Dallin Hoker.
Yeah,
going to Colorado State. In our show sheet, I wrote Nevada because Jay Norvell was just at Nevada, and
you got me.
Yeah,
you got me,
yeah. But obviously, when Jay Norvell was at Nevada, he had a very productive tight end in Cole Turner. Cole Turner, a massive dude who was a superb athlete as well. Didn't really play in line, more of a big slot type guy. Hoker probably a similar build. I mean, he's 6'5", 245. He signed with BYU in 2018. Had offers from Oregon State, Utah State, Colorado State, and earned praise from the coaching staff pretty much every spring at BYU, but sat behind guys like Isaac Rex and never had the opportunity to start. So transfers out, looking for the opportunity to start, finds his way to Colorado State with Jay Norvell. Likely, if he didn't want to start, he's not going to go to somewhere where he doesn't think he will. So Colorado State, Dallin Hoker, probably the future starter there, and probably a good player. I mean, he's 6th all time in Utah high school football history in single season receptions. So there's your fun fact of the day.
I think Hoker actually outsnapped Rex last year too. I know because I owned a bunch of Rex as cheap tight end flyers, and he wasn't
Rex
anyone that you wanted to play.
Was just particularly horrible. Yeah,
he just was not a guy you wanted to roster. And then you Kyle tracked down Everett Hunter. He's the tight end for JUCO this year. He's going to New Mexico again. New Mexico, not a great offense, not prolific. It's probably not something you want to play. So, you want to talk about these coaching changes, Kyle?
Yeah, I mean, none of them are. Yeah, none of them are big. I mean, UNLV fired their coach and brought in Barry Odom, kind of a high-profile name for a UNLV type school. I mean, Odom was a former SEC coach, former head coach of Missouri, so brings a bland style of football to the Mountain West, and had this whole fiasco where he was going to bring in Bobby Petrino as his offensive coordinator, and then Petrino got sniped for the Texas A&M offensive coordinator job. So his offensive coordinator at UNLV will be Brennan Marion, who was the pass game coordinator at Texas last year. Obviously, the pass game at Texas last year was all right.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think this hire necessarily hurts a guy like Ricky White too much. I think Ricky White will be fine, but I'm not like excited about players at UNLV because of Barry Odom and Brennan Marion.
Yeah, and then Fresno State OC moved on and is replaced by a guy that was on the staff already.
Yeah,
right?
the former quarterbacks coach. So, I mean, Fresno State just keeps going down the Kalen DeBoer tree. Obviously, Jeff Tedford was a promotion after Kalen DeBoer left for Washington. So they just keep promoting people, and we'll have another opportunity to talk about Kirby Moore when we go to the SEC and talk about Missouri, because I think it's a decent, a really good hire actually.
Yeah, I mean the DeBoer tree certainly has been fruitful so far for CFFB. So here's the finished product of our painstaking labors for you. We'll pop this on the Patreon. We'll probably throw this up on Twitter, just to get it out there, get the content out. So we think there's a couple of guys that are, maybe Devy relevant, right? Taylon Green, we were really impressed with him last year. Worth a late flyer. Chevan Cordiero, I don't think he's going to be like an NFL starter, but he's the kind of guy that, might find a spot on a team, have a cup of coffee. Maybe he's a 7th round.
Take a preseason snap.
I don't know. Who knows? Maybe he backs up, and plays a couple of games. But worth knowing the name. And then we think the running backs might be interesting. Obviously, Jeanty, we're pretty high on. And then the 2 freshmen that came in, fairly highly ranked guys. You want to keep an eye on them. They could be really productive and work them way into some draft conversations for 2026. And then quite a few players that we care about for college fantasy football, dynasty, best ball, whatever you guys are playing. For me, the highlight of the conference was the Russian quarterbacks. And then, we think we have some serious production here at the running back position. Whaley's going to be awesome. Holani is just like steady Eddie, 3 years of 1,000 yards, at this point, or 800 plus for 3 years. Jeanty should be on there as well. Tylan Hines, the Hawaii running back, we can't overstate the value of that. And even guys like Eldridge, Sherrod, Dollars. We don't need to go back over the list, but there's some pieces here that are certainly interesting to know. Kyle, you got any parting shots on the big board, or the wrap up on the Mountain West?
No, fun conference, I guess. Not real. No, I can't even sell it. I guess interesting. There's a lot of open holes and not a lot of spring reports. So probably one of the toughest conferences we could have done first. Because like we said, there's a ton of wide receivers who left, and there's a ton of like gaping holes in some of these offenses. And then, I'm Googling looking for anything about their spring game, and it's just like, it happened.
Yeah.
Or pay $6 to read about what happened.
Yeah, it's not Georgia where there's like 22 people writing about every spring game. Although you do know, Kyle, I do have the I pay for the 247 Sports at least. So
I was on the Fresno B. So unless you pay for the Fresno B,
I'm not there, dude. I'm not that much of a degen yet. We'll get there though. We'll get there. All right, so it's been fun as always. Always a good time dumpster diving in the in the G5 schools here. And again, if you made it through this, we're proud of you. We're gonna have some conferences that are a little bit more action packed coming up.
I miss the old Mountain West. We're
building. Go ahead.
I miss the Kellen Moore Boise State teams. I miss Doug Martin.
Yeah, man. Even Boise State, even like Shakir, like there's some players on that team that were fun a couple of years ago. But so we're building towards like a big board for your drafts for Campus to Canton, for the college side, for college fantasy football. It's a product we're going to drop and make it available to anyone that wants to use it to really get an edge over your league mates. So that's what we're doing here. Hopefully we're doing it well. And I appreciate you all. Check in next time.